Hello, dear all. Today, the essay that we are going to analyze is On Superstitions, written by A.G. Gardiner. The analysis is done by Dr. Vinamrata. It is an essay which talks in detail about how man always has this fear of the unknown, and because of this fear against what he does not know about this universe, how ignorant is he in this universe, he always develops a kind of defense mechanism in the name of superstitions. And these superstitions have been passed on from generation to generation, starting from the ancient times when science was not that developed and people didn't knew how to describe or talk about the various natural phenomena or to analyze the various natural phenomena around them. So they attributed some kind of superstitions to each and everything. Now, in this scientific age with scientific temperament, if we do believe in these superstitions, it would be a kind of drawback to our scientific bent of mind. So, in this essay, he analyzes all these aspects and will talk about it in detail. So, let's begin with the essay. We as Indians, if we talk about our superstitions, the most common one of them is that if we see a cat crossing the road, we won't cross the road unless and until we wait, unless and until someone else crosses the road. It is thought to be seen as a bad omen. And there are so many other such superstitions that we have associated ourselves with, which has got actually no logic behind it. So, before moving on to the essay, let's start with A.G. Gardiner. A.G. Gardiner, full name is Alfred George Gardiner, and his timeline is 1865 to 1946. He also wrote by the pen name of Alpha of the Plough when he was writing for The Star. And because he was a writer at The Star, he chose this name because Plough is the name of a constellation and a group of stars, and Alpha is the largest star among that constellation. In that constellation, so he wanted himself to shine to its brightest full, and that's why he named himself as, or he wrote with the pen name of Alpha of the Plough. And when we try to talk about A.G. Gardiner, he was a essayist, a journalist, an editor, an author. He has written several books. The famous books are The Warlords and Leaves in the Wind. And he had been edited at many high-ranked dailies and weeklies. And when he was writing for The Star, it was in 1915. And when we are talking about this particular essay on superstitions, it appeared in the second series of Alpha of the Plough. Now, in this essay, the theme is of fear. How an individual always suffers with this superstition, with this fear of the unknown. And in this video lecture, I'm not going to talk in detail about line-by-line analysis of the text, but I'm giving you an overview of the text. And in my next series in this video lecture, I'll add upon the line-by-line analysis of the video. So, what is the general concept in this text? The general concept is that he starts with the various superstitions that we all have associated ourselves with. And he talks about, in that term only, he talks about the superstition of walking around the ladder. He talks about the superstition of looking at a new moon. He talks about the superstition of number 13. And he then gives us a long narrative of all these events. He tells that how, because some of the superstitions he feels that may have been developed by some kind of logic also. Because like walking around the ladder, if you walk around the ladder, beneath a ladder, actually, what will happen? It may happen that the person who is on the ladder may throw something down by mistake and it may fall on you. And it may also happen, then he puts on a humorous tone and says that it may also happen the man himself may drop down, and in any of the case you may get hurt. So it is a kind of logic actually, and this kind of logical superstition can somewhere or the other be followed also. But illogical superstitions like looking at the new moon, or the superstition associated with number 13, and it becomes so prominent in our minds that in America, basically here he mentions London because he is writing in England, but this is a general trend followed in America also. They don't have generally number 13th floor, and if any murder or something happens in England in number 13 house or in number 13 lane, people will blame number 13 for it because they feel it to be associated with bad omen, not understanding this fact that it may be because or the same number of crimes may would have been committed in other lanes and in other houses also with different numbers, but because it happened in number 13, they would totally associate it with some kind of bad omen associated with number 13. Another thing that the author tells us here is that because of this, there is a psychological burden on the mind of a man. And if he is admitted in a hospital, the doctors generally won't associate a person with number 13 bed because it will affect in the treatment of the patient, because the patient may have some kind of psychological burden thinking that because he's on number 13 bed he may not get cured, and in that sense it may happen that the person suffers even more because of the psychological burden rather than because of his ailment. And he also gives an example of a army man who was once cured totally after the wounds that he got in the army, but as soon as he came to have a small small kind of mole on his face, a small kind of pimple actually on his face, he was so much afraid of that fact that he died of that pimple on his nose. So generally this is the aura, or actually this is the bad aura of number 13. And then he also talks about in the ancient traditions how there were other superstitious beliefs like finding out whether it is going to be a good omen or a bad omen by taking out the entrails of a animal. So the beast would be sacrificed and his body parts would be taken out. This kind of description we find in Julius Caesar by Shakespeare, because before going into the Senate hall, Julius Caesar asks for this sacrifice, and this sacrifice is done and the beast does not have a heart when they pull out the entrails of the beast. So these kinds of sacrifices were done earlier in ancient ages to find out whether it would be a bad day or a good day for them. So this kind of superstition is totally sham. This kind of superstition is totally illogical and out of league. So he says that such kinds of superstition should be shunned. He also talks about in the last phases of the essay about the superstition when Cicero died at the hands of Brutus because of this superstition. Why? Because Cicero, earlier it was in the ancient culture, it was thought that if you see crows, it is considered to be bad omen. And Cicero was all ready to set a sail in a ship and would have run away from the battlefield, but he saw some crows hovering on the sea, and because of that he returned back, and he was on his return killed by Brutus. So he says that this superstition cost Cicero his life. And in this way, with several examples, be it of ladder, be it of number 13, be it of moon, be it of the ancient culture and traditional omens which were followed by the Romans. And in this series he also talks about how once when Cato was to be elected in the House of Commons, at that time it was a thunder was heard, and because of that the meeting was adjourned, because in earlier times it was a superstition. People thought that if a thunder is to be heard, it is not considered as a good omen, and anything whatever they are practicing at that time itself, it should be stopped. So now when we analyze this thing also, you can find out, or you can logically analyze it, that in earlier times thunder was something, a natural phenomenon which was dangerous for people. People were afraid of it. They were not able to understand why this thunder occurs. And in that time, in those days, it was safe for them to be at home at the time of thundering and lightning than going out. So just because of one thunder, the House of Commons were adjourned, and Cato was not able to be elected as their king. So in this way, he gives us a series of events and a series of examples how superstitions is followed in England, and tells us to be more practical, more logical, and more inclined towards our kind of logical bent of mind, and shun or disregard superstitions. So this was all about on superstitions in this video lecture. I'll come up with one another video lecture where I will talk about in detail, line by line analysis of the essay. So if you have been benefited by the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on the video. And your comments and your likes make me feel that I am doing something good, and make me feel that okay, you have been benefited by it, or even if there is some drawback, you can point out so I may know where I have to correct myself. So on this note, thank you.